This is clinical practice. I think you do, but I'll just do it to my computer. Let me see. Okay, we are recording.
Awesome. It is the Tarzan down here.
Okay, Angelica, I see you are online. Just let me know in the little text box if you have any questions, and just make sure that you can hear me. Can you hear us?
All right, so go on and snap this QR code if you have not already so you can get access to this. It includes the whole slideshow as well as towards the end a list of interview questions. I also have a physical copy for those of you who want it as well. You can keep it and or pass it off to someone else. It's okay. Things are falling out of my bag here. Don't worry about it.
And everyone popping online, if you have any questions, you are on mute just because background noise, but you can ask me in the group chat.
Okay, so I say we go on and hop right in. My name is Dr. Meredith Critchfield. Most of you guys know me, and I know you. I'm a professor here, and my co-host with the mostest over here today is going to be Professor and Faculty Chair Emily Pottinger. Katie Sprudy is at home with her little one sick, so we'll say some prayers for her little baby. But our whole goal here is to talk about how we can perfect the teacher interview and really make sure that we're nailing the interview to get the job that we want. Now, when it comes to NES test prep sessions that I lead for Explorers, the room is full, right? Standing room only, people on the floor. But when it comes to nailing the teacher interview, less people show up. So first off, kudos to you guys for showing up here today. But number two, there's a reason for it. Because all of us know we need to pass our NES tests, right? We know we need to prep for those tests. But a lot of us feel like, well, there's a teacher shortage. I should be fine with my interview. I will find a job, okay? So while the NES test prep sessions seem more obligatory and necessary, this seems more like something, oh, in the distance, I'll get there when I get there and I'll get a job no matter what because there's a shortage. Let me say this though. Although there is a teacher shortage, there is not a teacher shortage in the schools you might want to work at. And I can confirm that. I have a lot of first and second year teachers, formerly my students, who attempted to get jobs in schools and did not get them because everybody is clamoring for jobs in certain districts and schools. And really only the creme de la creme, they're the ones that are actually getting the jobs. So I'll give you guys an example. I had a student, Ryan McCormick, former student Ryan McCormick, if anybody knows him. He was an outstanding student. He came to this test prep session, or this prep session, he practiced his interview questions, and he got the one job open in the district. The one job that was open. He nailed it. And he was going up against people who were transferring in from other districts that have been teaching for 5, 10, 15 years. So all of that is to say, yes, you will get a job, but will you get the job you want? Not necessarily. So kudos to you for showing up and putting your best foot forward to get ready for all of this, okay? So, no, we were just working. Okay, so our goals, we're going to tap into some prior knowledge like always. We're going to talk about soft skills, which would be opposed to hard skills. We're going to talk about appropriate teacher interview responses. There are certain things that we're looking for, and you want to make sure that you can speak to that. And then some opportunities to kind of help you prepare and get your voice out there. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right, so if you would, take a moment, just share what you already know about any of the components of the teacher interview process, whether it's resumes, letters of recommendation, how to dress, what to bring, any of that, go on and share that out.
And online, you can share it in the chat forum.
Feel free to chime in. I'm just okay.
Give me an eyeball.
How does it feel working?
I felt like that when I held it the other way.
Doing it that way, it works better. Just work the whiteboard. You want to type it out online if you are not already?
So online, share what do you already know about either resumes, letters of recommendation, stuff you would bring to an interview, how you should dress, any background knowledge that you might have.
All right, let's come together. We'll take 2 or 3 folks sharing out. What do we already know? What do we feel like we at least have some knowledge of and we're not sort of starting totally fresh about?
Your resume can have your work experience.
Absolutely, yeah. So your resume should absolutely include your work experience. Now, if you're in my 480 class, and many of you have been or are or will be in my 480 class, I actually spend time going through what should be on a teacher resume. And I break down the components and the order in which those will go. So hopefully, if I don't see you in 480 yet, I will see you at some point. Very nice. What else do we know? You guys are like, I don't know much, that's why I'm here. That's completely okay.
Another one about resume, like you should have, there should be like one page, like maybe 2, and like nice and concise about what they actually want to know and not include every single little thing about it.
Exactly. Yeah. So we won't talk a lot about resumes today, but I'll give you a kind of a quick blurb on it. It needs to be 1 page. Don't roll over onto 2 pages. Here's why. Spoken with an HR director for Phoenix Elementary. Again, if you're in my 480, you'll meet him next month. And he knows that the HR software cuts off the 2nd page of a resume. So even if you had a 2nd page, some of the software prevents that person from ever seeing it in the first place. So keep it to 1 page. Keep it concise, relevant, recent contact information with an objective to follow, specific to that job you're seeking, and then follow that up with your teaching and work experience as well. So a little bit about that. Thank you for that. Anything else we want to mention before we get into what we don't know? Yes, okay, it works. Okay. So in all of your classes, you guys spend a lot of time learning what we call hard skills. These are the strategies. These are the methods. These are the theories. This is the assessment practice. All of that. You guys spend so much time. But less time do we spend actually teaching you about the soft skills. And these are your people skills. People skills that you need to succeed in this profession. And that you really need to nail the teacher interview. So a lot of the teacher interview is just how you are relating and socializing and making an impression upon the people that you're interviewing with. Okay? So let's break down a few of these. Obviously, appropriate body language, and Professor Pottinger, I'll have you add some stuff about this, but appropriate body language is key. And I can give you guys an example. I had a teach out the other day where the teacher, student teacher, was sort of slumped over, and they were engaged vocally, but non-verbally, the can't do that for long. Quasimodo. But the cues they were giving off was that they just weren't interested. They weren't really that enthused to be there. Now, vocally, they were using inflection and they were giving off the message that they cared. I had to say to that student teacher, hey, hold on here. The cues I'm getting from you are that you're not really wanting to be there. So really thinking about how you square off your shoulders, square off your hips, that says a lot about the attention that you're giving. So when you're in an interview and you're first meeting someone, you take shoulders, hips, square them completely to the person's hand that you're shaking. Same thing when you're answering questions. If you're answering questions to a whole panel, turn and face that person entirely. Square off to them. Don't just give them the shoulder and look over. Turn and face them right on. Anything with that you want to add?
I think this is something that sometimes we think we might have good body language, but we might not. So ask your friends. Usually there will be that close friend that can tell you, like, the look on your face. You know, I was just in one of your classes, and we were talking about the special face that sometimes comes on when you don't even know you're doing it. So those are things that maybe your buddies or family members could say, like, hey, can you give me a little quick analysis? Like, do I ever look a certain way when I'm not meaning to? I might be happy or in thought, but I look like I'm mad or unapproachable. You know, as somebody who does a lot of interviews, that first impression and how somebody presents themselves physically makes a big impact on me, and it's not even on purpose. I don't mean to do it, but it's like human nature. You can't help but like, oh man, that person is making me uncomfortable. So something to ask your friends about.
And there have been some studies done that it takes less than 10 seconds for someone to make a first impression on you. 10 seconds. It doesn't matter what brilliance you have to follow in those next 30 minutes of the interview. If those first 10 seconds don't land well, then that says something. So keep that in mind. Really, that first time you make eye contact, first time you shake hands, all of that, make it impactful.
And the crossing of the arms is another big one. I just got myself doing it.
I do it all the time. Because I'm cold, people. I'm cold, so I got to cross my arms.
Or it's like, it's just where my
It looks
arms
like you're angry.
go. And closed off. So like, that's one thing. Like, figure out, if that's a habit, figure out a place where you can kind of put your hands, not fidgety, but how can you rest your arms and hands without looking closed off?
Right, and when we interview folks, the handshake does matter a lot. Because it signals to me the kind of temperament you have. If you are coming in with bone-crushing skills, to me, you're going to try to roll over everybody. You're just going to try to steamroll everyone. And I don't want that person on my team. I want an equitable team, people that have their input and their share, right? Now, if you come in with what we call like the limp or dead fish, that also says something to me. You're going to be the one that gets rolled over by bone crusher, okay? So you have to find that happy medium where you're not crushing hands, but you're also not loose and limp. So we would love for you guys to try it out with the folks at your table, shake hands, and give feedback to that person. Is that an appropriate shake? And here's another thing I gotta say, because a lot of ladies in the room, a lot of ladies tend to think that they can't or should not have a strong hand grip. That's false. Go in with purpose, but not crushing purpose. Not send you to the hospital purposes, but I want this gig purpose, okay? Try it out with the folks around you.
And for our friends online, make sure you do this when you do come in contact with somebody at home, maybe a friend. Try out your handshake.
We're seeing handshake throw. Like, whoa. There have been times like I've gone in for the shake and I'm like, I literally crushed you and I feel bad about it, but then I'm like, do I say something? Do I not say something, right? Because is it weird to be like, oh, I just hurt you? But then they're looking at you like, no, you didn't hurt me. It's very weird.
They have a tear.
Very weird.
If there's a tear in their eye,
if they walk back to college, so let's continue on. Fidgeting. Many of us have nervous tics. Some of which we know, some of which we don't know. Again, ask a friend. For a lot of ladies, it's the stroking of the hair. It drives me nuts in an interview when somebody's going like this. Over and over. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's picking your cuticles. Maybe it's playing with your glasses. There are any number of fidgets that you might have. It signals nervousness. It signals lack of preparation. And if you're fidgeting under the table, it's a cause for confusion and concern, right? Like, what are you doing out there? So be aware of your particular fidgets. Who in here has one? What do we do? Shake your leg. Okay, good. That is an excellent point. If you are shaking your leg, it will for sure rattle the table. And even if you think people aren't picking up on your vibrations, they are. So be mindful. That's the kind of vibration we don't want them to pick up on. So be mindful if you are doing the leg shaking. What do you do? Leg shaking. Anyone have a different one?
Fidgets online? Any fidget?
Cuticles.
But like, I do that just like when I'm bored too.
Yeah.
Because like right now I'm not nervous, and you were like cuticle picking. I'm like, oh.
Was that too real? Was that too bored? Posture we kind of spoke to, hand placement. We do recommend that when you are in an interview, you just sort of gently interlace your hands and place them on top of the tabletop. Again, when your hands are underneath, you're wondering if you're fiddling thumbs, picking cuticles, etc., picking off your nail polish. So setting your hands interlaced signals control, signals professionalism, and also signals that you're not so nervous. So keep that in mind.
We had one online, not necessarily the fidgets, but the
Oh yes, we will get to the
Oh, yeah.
We will get to those. Thank you for that. That's really something. All right, environment. Let's talk about the seating arrangements. Now, I want you guys to know about a very popular form of interviewing that has kind of come to the forefront, but it takes a lot of different forms, and I want you to be aware of that. It's called the job fair. We host one out here on campus. You guys see that? There are tables set up with trifolds and people, you know, kind of selling their district, selling their school. Maybe you walk away with a mint or a lanyard, like you feel like you're feeling great, right? Like they're selling themselves to you. But I have several now first and second year teachers whose job fair actually consisted of a one-on-one interview with the principal or superintendent of the district. Doesn't seem like a fair to me, right? It seems not as leisurely and jovial as it might seem. So the job fair actually involved one-on-one interviews. And she thought it was strange because they actually gave like a time frame, said, oh, come to the job fair during this time frame. And she thought, okay, nothing of it, fine, I'll show up during that time. It's a half an hour window, but no problem. Well, that half an hour was essentially screening interview where they asked those initial questions. Why do you want this job? Why do you want to work in this district? What do you have to offer us? Etc. So there is a job fair option, but it comes in a lot of different forms. The casual gets your piece of, you know, Hershey's Kiss chocolate and keep walking from table to table, or you interview with the superintendent. Very different, okay? So that's the first one that you need to be aware of. The next setup that you need to be aware of that, again, has become more and more popular is the panel. Professor Pottinger, do you want to tell us who are some of the folks they might expect to see on a panel and then how they can address those folks?
Yeah, so it can be a wide variety. Sometimes a panel is going to include fellow teachers that could potentially be on your team, could be a principal, could be an assistant principal, could be literally anyone from the district office. So oftentimes they'll have, maybe it's 2-3 people, maybe it's 5-6-7 people. So it really can vary. Those panels can really vary. And I've experienced quite a few, I've been on quite a few panels here, and it just adds another layer of kind of a little bit of intimidation if you are the one interviewing. So I think, and correct me if you pipe in if you think, I think it's appropriate.
No, I will.
I think it's appropriate to ask, you know, what's the interview style?
Yes.
What can I expect for the interview? And more often than not, they're going to tell you. So the panel really can be
And how many people will be in attendance?
Yep, so that you can be prepared with the materials that you're going to bring. So kind of be prepared for anything, because it could be one-on-one, or it could be 7 people. So asking those questions ahead of time shows that you're interested, you care, you're knowledgeable enough about interviews in general that you know to ask the questions.
One mistake I see made with panel interviews is that the candidate will assume who the person in charge is and will give most of their time and attention to that person without knowing that the person that might actually do the hiring might be somebody that you're not thinking. So for instance, let's say you are hiring for an English language arts position and there is a reading coach at that school. Now that reading coach seems important, but not as important as the principal sitting next to him or her. So you turn your attention and you give lots of your answers to that principal. Lo and behold, it's the reading coach that's going to help make that final decision, not the principal. And the principal says, hey, who do you want? Who do you like? So be aware of really focusing in and making eye contact with every single person and making sure that no one feels shortchanged in a panel. And it's hard to do if there's 7 people there, but it's very important.
And even with a really strong team, your colleagues or future colleagues could have a big sway and say in who's hired on their team. So even if it is someone who would be essentially your equal, when you're hired, you still want to give that attention and courtesy to them because they might have the principal's ear.
Exactly. And the same thing happened. We hired a new faculty member. I was on that committee. Although that person was going to be my peer, I had a lot of say in offering my feedback and what I thought and whether I'd actually like to work alongside this person. We did. Here's Dr. Nielsen, now hired. But that's important to know, is that people will have say and you might not even realize it.
Yeah.
Copies and placements of materials. Please make sure you have enough copies for everyone in attendance. Again, that's why you have to ask up front. Nothing feels more uncomfortable in a panel style interview when you're the one person that didn't get the materials, the resume, etc. So what should you bring? Here are my preferences, and the HR director of Phoenix Elementary echoes this as well. They'll have a copy of your resume, but it never hurts to bring another one. So bring your resume. Bring an example of a unit plan that you have taught, whether in practicum or in your methods classes, and taught well, that you think really shows engagement and differentiation, because that's what districts want. And then if you have any samples of student work that you've done or materials that you've created. So even in practicum, if you haven't been able to snap any photos of students' work that they've completed, you still have made documents in your methods classes that you can print off and bring in. So if you've made an assessment, if you made a graphic organizer, you could print that off and bring that in, okay? So make sure there's enough copies. Make sure you have your resume. Make sure you have a solid unit plan, and then any artifacts like student work or graphic organizers you've made, etc. Is there anything else you could add to that?
I think, the online portfolio is a big kind of push now, and I think it depends on the district.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to showcase something like that, I suggest, bring something to showcase that on, because the interview setup might not have the capability. So if you are going to showcase something that has a lot of tech and you are really fabulous with ed tech tools, so that's a strength of yours and you really want to showcase that, just make sure you have all of the stuff that you would need to showcase that with you.
Yeah, you don't want to be like, the link's on my resume, because then I'd be like, well, you should have showed me.
Exactly.
Yeah. If we're being honest.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of when to hand out those materials, I recommend handing them out when you refer to them. So rather than feeling like they're in a class at first, like, you get a paper, you get a paper, you get a paper, you get a paper. We're not Oprah here. Wait to hand those out until they're relevant. So when you get to that relevant point, like, oh, I've done this really engaging lesson plan. It involved a lot of Kagan structures. It went really, really well. And here's that example. And then you pass it out and you point it out to them and you take them to different parts, okay? But just handing them a fat packet and hoping that it will be of some meaning to them, it won't.
And it's like human nature. The second we get something, we start rustling through it.
Yeah.
So instead of listening to what you guys are saying, they're going to be rustling through papers that may or may not make sense to them.
Yeah, absolutely. It does make a good impression, though, to come in with papers.
Yeah.
People often ask, and I used to be really weird about this. I would go to Office. I'm weird, I know. In general, I'm weird, but I was extra weird. I would go to Office Depot and get really cute folders, in the color of the school I was. It didn't have their logo on it or anything, or the school name. I wasn't that weird. But when I went to Floyd Central, it was green. The school colors were green, so I passed out green folders. I don't know if it was any subliminal messaging I was trying to send them, but for me, it was a way to kind of show them really formally, here's something I've put together and is of importance to me, and hopefully will be of importance to you. And I've always loved interviews when they happen. Even if I don't look through all their papers later, I do value that they come in prepared like that. Yeah. Let's talk about how to field those interview questions. You should be practicing. So to me, it is, you guys will have that full list of possible interview questions. You should be practicing those. And maybe not all of them, but you need to be practicing the key ones. And you need to practice them in a way that you can either see yourself in the mirror doing it, or do it with family and somebody that will be honest with you about the response. I was very fortunate. My mom and sister are public school teachers, so I practiced with them and they gave me responses, and my mom was like, ooh, nope, not a good answer, right? So I got that kind of feedback. So find somebody in your life, whether it's even somebody in here today, that you can connect with and get feedback on. But practice practicing to me is essential.
And for our online friends, you've emailed me, so we'll get you that material.
And it is okay to ask to repeat a question because sometimes the questions will be like part 1, part 2, part 3, and they'll just kind of like lay them all out there for you at once, and you're like, whoa, like I have a hard time with that when somebody is like, well, first tell me this, and then this, and then this, and I'm just overwhelmed. So it is okay to just say, oh, I'd like to start with your first question, answer that, and then say to them, would you mind repeating that second question for me? So don't be shy about asking them to repeat a question. A, it buys you a little bit of time. It buys you 10 seconds of think time you didn't have before. But B, it makes sure that you're actually answering the questions accurately. Because when I ask a big kahuna question, very rarely does anyone ever answer the second portion. We're podcast co-hosts, and we now know that when we do that, nobody gets to the second half of the question. So you have to, be okay with asking them to repeat it and, trying to get to that second question.
And that can help with the ums too. Instead of responding with an you're asking them to repeat the question, so it gives you that buffer.
It looks like you're just being really focused and intentional when really you're confused and stressed about your answer. Okay, so let's get to our online point about our fillers. Many of us have fillers. These are the words like okay, yeah, like. Sometimes they'll be very extensive fillers. I'm not going to tell you mine because I've been working on it. I'm a recovering filler speaker. But I had a filler that was a good, 8 words long, right? It was a long filler. So your fillers might be something that you fill in that empty space with. It's not just a word or two. It might actually be a sentence you use to fill the space. Ask someone else in your life what your fillers are. That's my challenge to you today. Go home, ask somebody you care about or in your classes, hey, do I have a filler when I speak? What is it? Because you want to pinpoint it and fix it now. And I do feel strongly that I've worked so much on my fillers that I don't have them much anymore. But when I was in your shoes, I had fillers aplenty, okay? So work on them now so that they're not an issue in your interviews.
And they tend to come out when you're nervous.
Yeah.
So you might not have filler in your day-to-day conversation when you're having an informal chat with your friends, but if you're up doing a presentation or if you're in practicum and you've taught a lesson, your mentor teacher might have caught your fillers. So that might be a good person to check out too.
Yeah, I used to have a friend of mine when I first started teaching make tallies anytime I used the filler, and one time it was like 35. I used the filler, and it taught me really quickly to get over my fillers. And then I just filled them with more fillers, and then it was a whole process. But now I'm good. Yes, now it was a sentence filler, but harder to catch. Harder to catch those, exactly. Next thing you want to think about is being concise with your answer. Most interviews will last between 25, 30-ish minutes, depending. And we want about 1 to 3 minute responses tops. And lead with the answer. I know it might be sort of intriguing to tell a story up front, but that is confusing for your interview panel because they're like, where are you going with this? What's your answer? So lead with the answer up front. My strengths are X, Y, and Z. An area of opportunity for me is this. One thing I want to improve upon is this. What I hope to bring to the table is this. Start with the answer up front. Don't meander your way to it. And then take 1 to 2 minutes after that, 1 to 3 minutes after that, pardon. Now, what do you follow up with? So you've got your question. You give them a clear, cut and dry answer. I do this and this and this. I have experience with this and this. I am seeking this and this. But then immediately follow it up with an example or story. Now, I often hear from my soon-to-be first-year teachers, but I don't have a lot of stories to tell. You do. Just by virtue of practicum, many of you guys will graduate with just 100 hours of practicum alone, not to mention entire student teaching semester. And some of y'all are going up against people who are getting emergency certified and never been in a class a day in their life. Now, many of you guys are younger, and so that might feel a little more intimidating, but in terms of experience, y'all went out over a lot of candidates. Not all, but a lot of candidates. So you do have experiences. So here's my other tidbit to you today. in addition to focusing on what your filler is, go home and either journal or write out or talk out some stories. Sometimes where you know you made an impact. Maybe it was when you helped differentiate for Raul. Maybe it's when you helped Ricardo with an assessment. Maybe it's when you led a class and it was really engaging. It doesn't have to be in practicum. It could have been in your methods classes. But have an example. Come up with at least 2 or 3 good stories or examples that you can share. I did that before I ever went in an interview, and then I like had these stories to like rely on. Like they became like my folklore a little bit. Ricardo's story was told around the world, right? As I interviewed. Global. So Ricardo went global. So you do want to make sure you've got stories in your pocket that you can share that match up with your answer. Any questions on that? Or, please, I would have you.
Another good story to consider too, I would say that more than likely your interviewers are going to ask you something about teamwork. So teaching is not in a silo. I'm sure you've been preached to that, but we have to work with lots and lots of different people. So you need to show your potential employer, how do I work with people? Here's a good example of how. And even if it was a difficult situation that you're kind of overcoming, that kind of humble confidence, you know, man, I had a really, you know, challenging situation. Don't say man. I had a really challenging situation. Here's how I overcame that, or here's how I took the lead, or whatever. So it could be a difficult situation that you then made a good situation. So think of that teamwork piece.
And I love her point here that it doesn't need to just be like from your teacher mindset to your quote unquote students or your practicum students. It can be teacher to teacher engagement, teacher to teacher relationships that you've worked to build. So maybe you had a really good working relationship with your practicum teacher. You ended up going in there to get 3 classes worth of practicum hours. Speak to that. They want to hear that. They don't want to hire somebody that just engages students. They want to hire somebody that they can actually plan lessons with. And trust that the assessment you create is going to be good, and trust that you're not going to create waves and the pain in the butt when it comes to team standing. Nobody wants that person on their team. To be that person who wants to be that person, but some people aren't. So I don't want any of you to do that, right? So you need to make sure you've got those stories of when you have maybe conflict, you know, resolved, or you've done something to kind of work with other quote unquote teacher peers.
We had a question come through from Aspen.
Hi, Aspen.
I worked in a school, and a question I struggled with to answer was always how you handle a behavioral situation with students. So they like to throw those at you, like
scenarios.
I'm gonna give you the most challenging scenario. How would you handle it? For me, this is a good opportunity to tap back into some of the methods and strategies that you've learned in your classes. So like Dr. Critchfield was saying, give that concrete, but then that's a good opportunity to fill in with a story. So something similar, or a challenging situation I had, or you know, in practicum, I'm sure you're seeing behavioral things going on. That's a good opportunity for you to share. Like, here's what I did to help support and move forward in this whatever behavioral situation. So that would be my 2 cents.
So the best way to answer this, like you cannot go wrong if you say something along these lines. Like don't quote me, but similar to this, okay? Something along the lines of, I talked to the student to get to the root of the problem first. I wanted to figure out what was going on that was causing the behavior concern, because principals don't want to hear you ever take the Band-Aid approach, which is, I used consequences. I used quote unquote punishment. Make me shudder, right? They want to hear, first I talked to the student. I figured out what was going on in their world. And then from that, I made a plan. If you take a student-centered approach in almost every one of your interview responses, you will get a job. You will 100% get a job, because that's what they want to hear. They don't want you to hear, or they don't want to hear that you're going to just sort of punish them or lobby consequences, etc. They don't want to hear just that you're going to clip up or clip down, for goodness sake. They want to hear that you're tending to the human. Okay. Each, right? Each. So we will rattle through this pretty quickly. I just want you guys to know that there are lots of clubs and jobs out there and available to you that can help you prepare for these sorts of endeavors because you'll be speaking that ed lingo a lot. So if you can hook up a job in the COE office, if you can hook up a job in ACE, if you can hook up a job by joining Educators Rising or Kappa Delta Pi, the Honor Society, there's so many different ways, and some of you are members of, there's so many ways to kind of get involved and speak that teacher speak, and that will help prepare you for interviews and kind of build that confidence. Let's talk about some of the questions you will certainly be asked. I'll offer a few, and then Professor Pottinger, if you have some that you think you'll definitely be asked. So 100% you will be asked a little bit about yourself, of course, but then following that, you will 100% be asked why you want the position at this school. Not just any old school, not why you want to be a teacher, but why you want to be a teacher at this school. So my suggestion to you is that you need to have researched the school. You need to know their mission and vision. You need to know their motto. You need to know their demographics. How in the world do you do that? How do you figure all that out? I recommend, if it is a public or public charter, you go to Great Schools, the website. You just type in the school's name, enter the zip code, and it will give you all of that. It'll tell you students' test scores, it will tell you demographics, it will tell you concerns in the school, like test scores are extremely low in this school, or parent involvement is very high in this school. It will tell you all of that. So before you go in, go to their website, go to the district website, if there is one, and also go to Great Schools, okay? So you need to do the legwork. And don't even entertain for 1 second the thought of taking a job where that school's demographics and mission don't align with your mission. Because that's how you're gonna leave the profession in a year. If you wanna make a life out of this, like all of us have, then you really do have to think, how do I line up with this school? I'll give you guys an example. I was recruited, whatever that is, from the principal and superintendent to go work at this school that was very high achieving. It was in a very rural area. It was nothing that I planned to do when I got into education. I wanted to work Title I, highly racially ethnic schools, big socioeconomic diversity. That's what I craved. That is not what I signed a contract for. And every single day it felt like I was a fish out of water. Every single day I felt like I didn't mesh with the environment. And I felt like the only people I connected with were some of my students who struggled. Some of those students who fell into those categories. And so I just strongly recommend that you can go into an interview just to get practice, right? You can do that. There's no rule against that, but don't ever sign a contract unless you see yourself in there for a long time, okay? Anything you want to add to that whole first question, why you want this position?
I think a spin-off of that one that sometimes you might get is the why are you a good fit for this school? So kind of a different twist on it, but that goes back to doing the research and knowing their mission, vision, philosophy, demographic. You got to do the research in order to know how you fit into the mix.
Right. So if it's a Title I school, you say, I've been 50 hours worth of practicum in a Title I school. I completed my student teaching in a Title I school. So make sure that that lines up. Other questions that you will surely be asked. You will be asked about behavioral issues. Thanks, Aspen, for that point, because that's absolutely true. You'll be asked about how you would handle behavioral concerns. Now, some school and district websites will make their discipline plan available. So research. Know their discipline plan. I'll give you an example. I had a former student, now teacher, who was very much of like the positive behavioral group. And she went into a school where their behavioral management was students were to stand in the corner with their nose on the wall. Legit. She was horrified. And she didn't know it. And so she went in and there was just sort of this like clash of opinions and thoughts and didn't go well, as you can assume. So do your research to see if they have a discipline plan in place. For instance, Washington very specifically uses PBIS, Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. So you cannot go into an interview at Washington without being comfortable with PBIS. And many of our teachers end up in Washington, so that's why I speak to Washington. So you'll be asked about how you handle behavioral concerns, research it. You'll be asked about parents, how you engage and get them involved. This is where, if you were just in my last 480 topic, you know that you want to be saying things like using Remind, Class Dojo, class newsletters, lots of parent-teacher conferences, that sort of thing. So you'll be asked about classroom management, parents, you'll be asked about how you differentiate, for sure, for diverse learners. Even if you're in a traditional academy, you likely will have them ask you, now what would you do if Sally Sue is a gifted learner? What would you do if, you know, Johnny Ray is an English learner? So you'll be asked about differentiation for sure. And then the other one you will most certainly be asked is, do you have any questions for me? Whatever you do, please do not say no. Don't say no. You look woefully underprepared. You look out of place. You look like you're not taking it that serious. Nope, you answered all my questions. Don't say that. Whatever you do, don't say that. So here's what you can ask them. You can ask them, what supports or training do you have in place for first-year teachers? What supports or training do you have in place for first-year teachers? If they try to give you some, I don't want to say BS because I think that's like anti-GCU's mission and vision to cuss, but bull stuff, right? I was like, I had to modify in my head, but I couldn't think about how to modify it. Yeah, bull stuff. If they try to give you some story about, yeah, we're working on developing a training, that means they have none. Don't listen to it. Don't buy it. They're trying to, on the spot, come up with something. That means you're not going to get any of the support. I didn't ask that question. Guess what? Somehow, some weird thing with my certificate, I got grandfathered into lifetime certification in the state of Indiana. So I could be 99, go back to Indiana, and still get me a job, okay? But that also meant that I got no mentor and no first-year teacher training. None, because there was none available for me per my certificate. I didn't ask. So y'all, I was like going around asking people to be my mentors. And they're like, no, I'm busy. No, I'm busy. And I'm like, oh, please, someone help me, help me. No one helped me, okay? But I should have asked the question, y'all, and I didn't ask the question. So ask that question. What supports and training do you have in place? Another thing, a great question that HR directors love, or great question, is like, in what ways can I get involved in your school? It's sort of a pandering question, right? Like you're like trying to, you know, preach to the choir there about, hey, I want to help out. Now be careful with that, because that individual Ryan that I talked about, who got that one coveted position, now he's in charge of student council. Oh no. And some like gifted club. And so be careful with asking that, because you may get what you wish for. But he's loving it, right? He's loving it. So there's that. So ask that kind of question. You guys, any other questions that you have heard of that you think might be valuable to ask? And you can type them out online as well. Yeah.
Okay, so I've been in a couple interviews, not teachery wise, so it's probably different, but just like in general, they'll ask you like, what's a cultural situation you've been in? And like almost every time that throws me on the spot, because like I think of myself, I'm just like, well, what do you mean? Do you mean like me going to like China and not fitting in? Like, what do you mean? Like specify culture. So I don't know if you have any like tips for that kind of questions.
Yes, so they're looking
what they're
probably
meaning
for
by that.
one of two things, and you could approach either way, and I think it'd be fine. One, if there's a culture clash you experienced and how you resolved it. Or two, how you supported students who were of a unique or different culture. Okay. So how you resolved a culture clash, and or how you helped a student who was a little bit different culturally than maybe the rest of the population in the class. Good.
And be thinking of these things as you're going through practicum, because like when you're thinking of the stories, there's a lot you can pull from what you guys are doing right now.
Okay, what questions do you guys have for us? What do you want to know more of? What are you like, oh, dress, shoes, oh, that's why you don't talk with your hands, you guys. That's why you don't talk with your hands. It's like, Okay, sorry about that. What questions do you want to ask? What do you want to know more about? Yeah.
I have this thing where when I'm talking to someone or just like that, I like pause and I'm like, oh wait, and I want to add on to it just to make sure that I know what they're asking me of. Like, how do I go about that in a good way? Like,
So I don't think pausing is a bad thing. I think losing eye contact is a bad thing. So if you need to pause and kind of collect yourself to answer, that's okay. Like, and if you were to ask a follow-up question or just take a moment to collect yourself, one trick that I've seen before is I would definitely bring in like a notebook of some kind, jot down a note from their question, because what it looks like is like you're just, oh, I'm just processing your question. I'm very intrigued by what you're saying, but really you're like, well, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? What am I going to say? Do I understand them? What am I going to say? So writing down before you even respond is totally okay. So pausing is fine. Writing down answers is fine, but losing that eye contact unless you're writing is a no-go, because then that signals to them that you've checked out when you're pausing. Good question.
Just be careful how long the pause is. long stares.
If Jeopardy music starts playing
Could be a little
from the
awkward.
loudspeaker, it's too long.
But I think, you know, if you're processing, it's okay to come back and say, okay, I'm understanding it. I'm understanding your question to be blah, blah, blah.
I think I heard. Yeah.
Ask
There's
a,
nothing wrong.
ask a clarifying question. I have no problem.
No, and I would prefer you ask and get the answer right than just bomb the question. Yeah. Because if you bomb the question, I'm not going to hire you. If you ask again and you say it the way I'm hoping you'll say it, then you hire.
And fact of the matter is, not everyone's good at asking questions. So even if these are
Even
like,
superintendents, like people who are like, they're hired to be people, and they're not people. They don't like people.
or the list of questions they have that's developed by the district is not the greatest. You know, so sometimes questions are just awkward in general or not phrased well. So if they're kind of reading off of a list, it might be a confusing question.
Yeah.
So
And some districts are legally bound to ask the exact same questions to every single candidate. Not every district's like that, but some are to prevent like HR violations. So sometimes they'll just stick to a script even though you've already answered the question. You feel like you're repeating yourself because they asked it again, but that's because they have to. It's not because some of them are bad interviewers. Some of them just have to ask them. Good, what else? Online, ask us questions too. What else do you guys want to know? Other tips, tricks, dress, how to respond, how not to respond.
You said before you even like go to the interview, maybe ask about like what the interview will look like. But I know like the district that I went to teach at, you apply online.
Yeah.
So who do you ask if you're not actually like seeing someone physically?
do they schedule the interview without ever having contact with anyone?
I don't know because I haven't like applied.
Typically
So do you
somebody
have a phone call or like
Somebody will
just
or
follow
an
up.
email. Yeah, somebody's gonna follow up because there's somebody that has to schedule that interview.
And it's not always the person that interviews
It's-
you, and that's tricky too, because you'll be talking to someone as if you are, you'll be talking to them as if you're interviewing with them. I remember when I interviewed here, I was like talking back and forth. This is I'm so looking forward to, but my interview consisted of 4 deans and a provost, which was like, I wasn't really expecting it, right? And I was like, thought I was like gonna go talk to Belinda, right, from HR. wrong. So those people might not be the same.
But always be nice to them because they still will have sway. What is the dress code these days for an interview?
Yeah, so my suggestion for interviews is to always dress up one level at least above the position you're hiring for. So if you are going for an instructional aid position, for instance, dress like a teacher would, if not more formal. If you're going for a teacher position, dress like a principal would, if not more formal. So my tip to you is level up at least 1 to 2 levels when you go into an interview. Beyond that, professional slacks, professional shirts. Ladies, be aware of how low cut things are.
Yeah.
Be aware of how short things are. Sometimes
And this trick does not work. That's not long enough. Like the whole
because that on me is like mere.
Right. You remember that trick? It's like,
Booty.
oh,
So-
if the dress is longer than my fingertips, we're good.
No. It should be at or below the knees. So yeah, ladies, be aware of that. And sometimes because so many of you are so young, in our head, conservative dress is one thing, but to someone who's 60 that's hiring you, conservative is very different when you were born in II, for instance. Like pre-Korean War. So that's just something to be mindful of, is just knowing that you need to definitely level up, but your version of conservative might not be their version of conservative. Other specifics with dress code, like specific things that you're like, would that be appropriate? Would that not be appropriate?
Like shoe-wise,
Closed-toed unless it's like a formal heel.
Polish or no polish?
nail polish.
Don't let it be chipped.
Yeah.
Polish or no polish.
Do this.
Don't come and look. No.
Yeah. Like this. Have like
Yeah. Don't. That actually, I've actually heard that some HR directors look at two things. I don't know how many of them actually do this, but I've heard that they'll look at your nails to see if they're trimmed or polished or chipped, just depending if you're male or female, polish and all that. And then they'll look at your shoes. Are your shoes clean? Are your shoes well kept? Are your shoes tied? Like if there are shoelaces, like all those things. So finger, nails, and shoes say a lot to HR directors, and a lot of quick judgments can come.
like
from
if
those.
you got chipped, just having them know, you know.
Okay. Hair. Are we talking colors or not colors? I think as long as your hair is washed and brushed.
Yeah. You might, if you tend to fidget with your hair,
Pull it
pull
back.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes honestly, like a good pullback can just make you look polished and clean.
Yeah.
Polished is the key word.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, even if our hair is freshly washed, sometimes like, I don't know, maybe it's a bad hair day or whatever, and when I get out of the shower, sometimes my hair does not look good. So you know, if you pull it back, it might look a little more professional.
Yeah, so just think of like that professional polished look when it comes to style. So it could be down, it could be half up, it could be in a bun or pulled back, but I probably wouldn't go in with Texas curls or anything too kind of flouncy or distracting, I would suggest. So if the style is relatively simple and not too distracting, I think you'd be probably pretty fine.
It reminds me also of perfume and lotions.
Oh yeah.
Just neutral.
overdo it.
Yeah, I would like maybe consider even not doing because oftentimes you're in a smaller space, so don't wear any of like the lovely Victoria's Secret super scented like flower bomb.
Yeah.
There's
There's an executive here that you can smell him and his cologne 40 feet out.
Yep.
40 feet out. Like I literally am like,
easy.
I was gonna say his name, but I was like, oh, there he is. I see him, and you can smell him from a ways. Now that probably
It's
seems
not
appealing, but it's not. No, it's totally somebody else. But it seems appealing, but it's not appealing at all. In fact, it's really distracting. And if somebody on that panel has a migraine or tends to migraines, they're just not even going to care what you have to say. Yeah.
So no, skip the thing.
Please.
Breath.
Yeah.
Breath.
Coffee. So, coffee will make your breath smell. Everyone. Worldwide, your breath smells after coffee. But you will likely have probably a morning interview for a lot of people. So make sure that you aren't stinky and dragon breath. And we can't smell your breath. So if you did have coffee, water, a lot of water and a mint before you go in. That will help it. No gum. That is. Yeah. Gum drives me bonkers. Like the clipping, the popping, it drives me nuts. So yeah, definitely no gum. Yeah. Oh yeah.
So like color wise for clothes, I was told at one point that you should wear like neutral color shirts. That's something.
I don't think that's a bad idea at all. I don't think it's a hard and fast rule, but I don't think that's a bad idea at all. I think my theory is always I want my soft skills, my personality, my experience to shine. Not my jacket, not my hairs, not my makeup, not my nails, not my anything else. Like I want my personality to shine. So thinking about picking something like neutral colors, I think would allow for that.
And jewelry too, like skip the big hoops, you know, the big bangles. Keep it simple. And I'm just gonna go back. Like we were talking literally this weekend.
Yeah. Don't go in with foot wide hoops.
But we were talking, and I think polished is the perfect word. Think think simple so that your personality and your skills shine, not your clothes or your outfit. There's a time and a place, you know, if you're a stylish person, but the interview is not really that place.
I mean, I've even got manicures before interviews.
Do you put down your reference of your previous boss or your current boss?
Okay, so when it comes to references, you usually have to have 3 in place, at least. And you'll enter that either, as Michaela mentioned, on an online portal, or you'll put it on your resume, or both, okay? And they will contact them. I've gotten 3 in the last couple days. So they will contact them. They do reach out to them.
Make sure you let them know.
You don't have to put your current boss on there if you feel like if you're going to go from an instructional aid position and they really want to hire you at that school, but you really want to go elsewhere. You don't have to put your current employer. That's not a necessity. And you can actually click little buttons that says, please don't contact my current employer on a lot of applications. So that's kind of nice to know. You don't feel like, you don't want to burn bridges with any person, any teacher, any district, but you also don't have to feel obliged to feel like you have to stay somewhere you don't want to be. So you can really pick and choose those people. Now, here's who I recommend. You need at least somebody who's been like a boss to you of your 3. You need somebody that has served in more of like an academic or mentor capacities, so someone like me, someone like Professor Pottinger. Those are the kinds of people you would want. And then you can also do a 3rd one that would be like an outside leader. So maybe a pastor that you've done work with, or somebody from a volunteer organization. So you need an employer, you need like a professor type, and then you can do a more personal reference, but they've seen you in some capacity of leadership or working with children, etc.
Like a mentor teacher that you've really connected with would be a good one. Just make sure that they know or ask, is it okay if I use you as one of my references?
Yes, let me know, because sometimes I will get them from people that I taught 5 years ago, but they married and changed their last name. And so now I'm like, I don't know who I'm filling this out for. So then I have to like try and do research, try and make phone calls. I mean, it just happened, somebody in the Alhambra district. I was like, I don't know. I put it all together and figured it all out after a lot of research. But definitely let that person know, hey, would you mind if I use you as a reference? My last tidbit before we go is this. Every single person you encounter in an interview matters. When you walk up, don't act like that administrative assistant is not important. That person may be the right-hand man or woman to the principal, and will say to them, yeah, they were on their phone the whole time. They were totally distracted. They were swiping left and right before the interview, whatever. They were Snapchatting their, cute hair, whatever it is. Definitely know that every single person, just a hashtag life rule, everybody matters. Hashtag interview rule, everybody really, really matters. Okay? So don't think for a second that there's always somebody watching you, and I don't mean that in a creepy way, just in a way they're trying to collect data to figure out if you're the right fit. Okay? If you guys have any last questions online or in person, stay after. Let us know, but we hope you enjoyed and learned something.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. I have a few extras. Do you think if anybody would want to take these to a friend that couldn't make it, or you think somebody would value these, you can grab it. Answer your question.